3, 2, 1, and we're back. Been a long time. How you been, Jordan?
Well, I've been doing okay, Joe. How are you?
I've been good, man. I've been real good. You look great, by the way. You still been doing your meat only thing? How's that going?
Yeah, I'm doing the only meat thing still. In fact, we're taking it a little bit more seriously, actually. Now instead of eating the meat, I just shove a little bit of gristle in my cheek and kind of suckle on that for the day, and seeing more success doing that. So it's really been life-changing, Joe.
Yeah, I mean, that is such a bizarre and intense diet, man. I don't know how you do it. I don't think that I could do it. But today, you've been helping estranged young men struggling in their Mythic Plus keys. Is that right?
That's exactly right, Joe. And these young men are dealing with such adversity coming from the elitists in this game. And some of them come to me, show me a parse of 10, maybe 15 if they're having a good day. And it's just really sad, their rotations are an absolute mess. And in fact, I remember this one time, this young, kind of fastidious boy came up to me after one of my lectures, and he asked me about his survival hunter and how he could improve and all that. And he pulls up his parse, and he shows me a 3, Joe. A 3, if you can believe that.
Oh, my goodness, a 3?
He's a 3, and the worst part of it was, so I'm trying to comfort this grieving hunter, and some demon hunter playing Neanderthal walks up and insults him right to his face. So I turn to him and I say, hey, how about you try playing a class that doesn't play itself, bucko?
Man, it's crazy, man. There's a lot of mean people in the world, and these young men, these terrible parsers, are lucky they have you to stand up to those guys.
Well, you get these 2-button, rap, fuck, scav, demon hunters throwing insults out like they're Albelong's gift to the world, and it just makes me sick, Joe. They're bragging about their 77 parse when they couldn't blade dance their way through a half-decent conversation even. So anyways, back to the survival hunter. I tell him, look, we need to set some realistic goals that are realistic to achieve. So I tell him, let's start by just trying to be the second best DPS in the group, and he goes, I can't. So I go, fine, let's try just beating the tank in damage, to which again, he goes, I can't. And I told him, okay, that's good and fine. Let's just try beating the healer in damage. And you know what, Joe? You want to hear something really great? After 3 weeks of practicing, getting his rotation down and everything, he still lost to the healer because he rolled the worst fucking spec in the game for some reason.
Wait. You gotta be kidding me, Jordan. You're telling me this guy practices rotation for 3 weeks straight and he lost to the healer?
He did lose to the healer, Joe. And being a survival hunter didn't help not one bit. But you know what else didn't help? He opted to not buy my new book, 12 Rules for Parsing. And if he had, he would have known to follow Rule 4, in this case ABL, always blame lag.
Yeah, and he certainly should have, Jordan. If you wouldn't mind for our listeners too, could you remind them of what your 12 rules are?
Absolutely, Joe, it'd be my pleasure. So rule 1 is a simple one. If you can't beat them, re-roll, which is rather self-explanatory, I like to think. Simply just re-roll to whatever class is flavor of the month that season. It'll sort of just sort itself out. Rule 2, don't stand in shit, bucko, which really just means avoid mechanics, and don't be a rad. You can't do much damage if you're dead. After all, I think it's pretty clear. And rule 3, of course, is don't throw the parse out with the bathwater, which just means, for example, let's say you're a class with a paddle res. Don't waste that global resing that rat fuck healer that couldn't dodge a breath to save his goddamn life. That's his fault, and after all, it's your parse we're talking about here. And rule 4, of course, is ABL, always blame lag, as I explained. If you end up with a poor parse, just tell him you were lagging because your mom wouldn't stop streaming fucking House Hunters for 2 goddamn seconds, even though she can barely afford the cottage you're both living in because she spends half her check every month feeding the slot machine down at Dottie's. Rule 5, stay alive. Every class except survival hunters and rep paladins have what are called defenses or defensive cooldowns. The difference between a 22, Joe, and an 85 is simply using these at the right moment. And rule 6, of course, is blame the tank. I see this all the time, Joe. You get some molasses-footed tank pulling 1 pack at a time on Tyrannical Week because some cockroach of a healer couldn't keep them alive in some previous run. And then you're sitting there dropping Rain of Fire on 2 moms because this tank is reliving some past trauma. I see it all the time, Joe. And rule 7, if the tank's doing fine, you're doing what you can, blame the healer. Some call this the golden rule, and though, I've always thought of that to be a bit of a fallacy, but it does hold some merit in certain situations. I mean, the bottom line, if that rat priest can't keep you alive, it's time to replace him. Rule 8, blame the balance. God only knows whether it makes mistakes. I mean, Aldi sent several lawyers into early retirement just in 2022 alone. But just look at bullshit life pools. That dungeon has been tuned more than an 87 Pinto during hurricane season in southern Florida. In rule 9, blame other DPS. Now, this rule requires some prerequisites in order to follow, mainly that you aren't the lowest DPS, but as long as you aren't dead last, this is an easy rule to go to if you fail your timer or your bars. Rule 10, blame the group leader. Now, don't invoke this rule if it's your key, of course, but blame the leader for putting together a bad composition. Chances are there was some buff you could have foreseen that you didn't because the leader is showing some preferential treatment to certain folks that share a common armor type. Rule 11, blame RNG. Complain over and over again about how you can't get that whetstone. Complain that you've re-rolled your key 17 times and gotten knocked in Alls of Valor 15 of those. Remind the group that with a bit of luck, you would be throwing out 99s like tamales during the Saturday market in Michoacan. Rule 12 is the final rule. Make up a situation. Now, this is the East in the hole rule, as I call it, because if you can't use any of the other rules, make up something. Tell them your cat just ran off with your WP and you can't move anymore. Tell them your parole officer won't quit blowing up your phone because you've missed your last 2 meetings. And that really is it, Joe. I mean, you should be able to use at least one, if not more, of these rules to have a successful parse, or at least explain why you couldn't get one. And that's why this is the 12 rules for your parse.